The example of TechCon that I'd like to share is the instruction booklet for a video game called Yoshi's Story. This instruction booklet has become kind of my go-to artifact when I'm trying to introduce new concepts in my introduction to technical writing classes, so I wanted to talk about it a little bit here. For context, Yoshi's Story came out on the Nintendo 64 in 1997, and Nintendo 64 games were all packaged with a short instructional booklet about the size of a greeting card, usually about 20 pages in length. These booklets would give the player information about controls and navigation, but they also gave you a little bit of background information, settings, story, just to kind of build immersion. Yoshi's Story itself is a game that takes place in a storybook setting, and the booklet carries on this kind of storybook aesthetic, which makes it a very appealing, very accessible kind of instruction booklet, which I find especially useful for my introduction to technical writing classes. To start with, this is a very accessible, easy jumping off point for software documentation. So pages from the Yoshi's Story booklet, I feel completely comfortable throwing up on the projector on the very first day of class, whereas something from like Microsoft or Adobe or something a little bit more serious, maybe a little higher stakes, I feel like I might lose some students. And students who do feel, a little bit intimidated by the technical part of technical writing do seem to appreciate this. Yoshi's Story is also a game that's made for children, so this is a booklet that is made for children. So it's very interesting to take students through something that's meant to be, maybe read by parents, but is mostly kind of largely reliant on pictures to get the reader through the booklet. So when we're looking at pages from the Yoshi's Story booklet, we can see how maybe the standard kind of colder and personal approach that a lot of documentation has is not going to be appropriate here. So what I like to do is I'll have an example that I've typed out of the instructions for Yoshi's Story, but they're formatted a little more familiarly like software documentation. I'll put the example from the book up, and we can kind of discuss, why one is a better approach than the other. Oh, but we also kind of theorize, if you were at work and you were trying to learn how to use Excel, for instance, would you want something that's a bunch of storybook pages, or is this kind of more to the point documentation going to serve you better? Finally, I find just the booklets in general to be a great way to introduce genre to the classroom. So the approach that the Yoshi's Story booklet takes in introducing story or controls is going to be vastly different than the approach used by the Doom 64 booklet, for instance. This is a pretty easy way for students to see, different approaches and how they're used for different audiences. That being said, all these booklets for the Nintendo 64 are available on the Internet Archive, and I definitely recommend checking them out. Thank you.